What is going on, people? We are Tottenham TV here, back again with another video for you guys today. And today we have Coach Stell in the studio joining us today because, Stell, where have you been recently? Tell us about your recent trip to the training ground, because I think he's got some very interesting information which I thought would be very interesting to share with you viewers about Tottenham's footballing revolution that is happening right now in the club. A lot of talk has been about, in the last 4 years, pretty much since Pochettino left, that the footballing vision, the footballing philosophy of the club has been pretty much non-existent, and that's been a big problem and a bone of contention for a lot of fans when it comes to the hierarchy and the direction the club are going. Now, obviously, Tottenham are looking this season with great football being played on the pitch under Ange Postecoglou. But you were at the training ground this week. You were speaking to a few of the academy coaches. And I want to know what you were hearing about not just the first team, but the whole footballing philosophy at the club and what's happening there. Yeah,
so essentially, I get to go to Hotspur away 4 or 5 times a year. And it's more for them to educate myself and other coaches on what's going on so that we can try and replicate what Spurs do. And therefore, when they're scouting for players, we do half the job for them. But over the years, going in and out, I've made good friends, good contacts, and I get a bit of an inside intel from people when I bump into them when I go.
Just for full context, when you say we can replicate, you coach a footballing team or a Sunday league team?
Yeah, I've been running a football club for over 12 years now. Been scouting for clubs as well. I've been in many pro club academies, first team training facilities in the UK and overseas. So you build a network of contacts. And at Spurs, there's always 1 or 2 people I always look for, which I did on Tuesday when I was invited in. And there's people that oversee recruitment, and there's 1 or 2 members of staff that work there. But, I always go over and say, what's the latest with this, and see if I can prize any information out of them. Okay, so on this occasion, this is the first time ever, and I've been going there for 10 years now, where it was led by the academy director. Just so people watching can understand, that is the equivalent of you going on a tour of the stadium at Spurs and Daniel Levy doing the tour.
Right.
It doesn't happen, right? He built the stadium. It's his baby.
Mm-hmm.
Let me show you around what I've built. That's never going to happen, okay? So when the academy director is leading this, it's a big thing. And the big takeaway I took from the event was that, 1, the entire academy now, all the teams are playing the same way. There's never been an emphasis on that as much as what I'm seeing right now. Number 2, they're only recruiting players for the academy and the first team that matches the system of the philosophy, which is how it should be done, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think every YouTube channel going has been banging on about that for about 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is there's now an emphasis on winning. It's never really been about winning, but there is an emphasis on the win, but without compromising the philosophy of play. And the last thing I took away from it was that going forward, if Ange was to leave Spurs in 4 or 5 years' time, if someone was to prize him away, let's say Real Madrid knocked on our door and said, look, Ange, you're brilliant. We want you. Tottenham, here's 20 million. We're taking him. And Ange said yes. Whoever we replace Ange with will be a continuity of what has been put in place. So we're not going to go from Poch, Jose to Conte to Nuno to Stili. It will be a De Zerbi. It will be, let's say, a Poch return. It will be a Nagelsmann. It'll be someone who plays from the back, looks to create overloads in midfield, and possession-based football.
And that's a concerted effort from the club. What has changed this summer? I know, because surely what you're talking about seems bigger than just Postecoglou coming in and changing philosophy. It seems like a concerted effort from the club to really get ahead of their footballing philosophy and their strategy. So who's been maybe central, in your opinion, or maybe to changing that?
Without a question of a doubt, it's Paratici. I heard it from the horse's mouth. Our new academy director. By the way, our new academy director is really good. And I'm not just bigging him up because I'm a Spurs fan. He's really good, very impressive when explaining what he's doing and why he's doing it. 10 years experience at Man City, worked under Mancini, Pellegrini, Pep Guardiola, 2 years at Anderlecht with Vincent Kompany. Vincent Kompany actually wanted him at Burnley. He told me on Tuesday. I spoke to Simon in front of everyone, and then I spoke to him afterwards privately. He was going to go to Burnley and work under Vincent Kompany, but Paratici, his words, Paratici called me up. He said, come to Spurs. I had a conversation with him. I came to Spurs. So Paratici's the one that headhunted him. He's the one that made the phone call. When you look at...
How long ago was that? It's
been about just roughly a year, maybe just under. So this philosophy of change began a year ago, because that's when Simon Davies came in, and he's slowly installed this change within the academy from, we're talking from 8-year-olds up to under 21s. Obviously, it's slightly different because 8-year-olds play 5-a-side, 10, 11-year-olds play 9-a-side, and then, you don't really play 11-a-side till you're 13. So playing out from the back and creating overloads, it will look slightly different because there's less kids on the pitch. But essentially, this philosophy of change began when Simon Davies came in. Paratici brought him in. And I guarantee you, Sim, Ange being appointed was to create, one, a happy fan base because fans were crying out for good football. And two, you heard Ryan Mason towards the end of last season when he was in charge saying, we need to bring back our DNA. Our DNA isn't right. So he would have been saying to the hierarchy, look, there's a misalignment within the academy and the first team. We're not doing things where we're aligned. So I think voices from within would have reached the hierarchy. Paratici certainly would have been aware, and they would have deliberately appointed Ange because he would have brought the alignment. And it's the first time, and like I've said to him, I've been going there for 10, 15 years. It's the first time I've seen an alignment from the youngest up to the oldest throughout the club. They've never had that alignment. It's typically been develop individual players that can win 1v1 battles on the pitch. Because if we can create that in an 11-a-side game of football, if we win 7 or 8 of our individual battles, we're going to win the game because we've got more players on the pitch winning individual battles. Now the emphasis is on, yes, we must still develop the individuals because it's still a battle on the pitch, but how do we bring it together as a team? Fans call it philosophy, identity. I call it, how are you going to get past your position using a particular method? The method we're using is possession-based football, and how we're going to create overloads so we outnumber them, so we can, unpick them. It's the first time we've had a way of doing it as a team, as opposed to just the individual.
From the academy point of view, or you mean
and the first team,
and the first team. And that's maybe why we're seeing a big improvement in the academy. They've won 5 on the trot this season, haven't they? Or so they're 100% record. They're playing very, very well. A lot of people are very excited about the academy players. So let's look. Let's.
Sim, can I just add one thing to that?
Yeah, go on.
You're going to see the best rewards from the academy in 10 years' time, because all the 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old players we've got, they're being taught this now. So they're going to have, 2-3 years of education of this before they either become first-team players or we sell them. 21, 22, they should be breaking in. The players who are 8, 9, and 10, they're going to have 10 years of this. So by the time they get to 18, 19, that's when you're going to see the real dynamite talent come through, as long as we maintain the philosophy and we don't hit the self-destruct button. So you're going to see talent come through, but the best will be, I would say, between 7 to 10 years' time.
And that's very, very encouraging. And hopefully, look, we seem to be investing in our future finally. And I think that's what a lot of people have been calling for. So let's drill down into some of the specifics. So we've got some screenshots here about what this philosophy and this strategy basically looks like from a tactical point of view. So let's walk through it.
Yeah, so just to explain to people what we're going to do now. On Tuesday night, they explained what Spurs are trying to do in terms of the way they want all the teams to play. And it made me realise why we struggled in the first 25 minutes against Arsenal, where we looked like we couldn't get the ball out from the back as fluidly as what we've done in previous games. And also, I was at the Emirates with you guys, and I just kept asking myself, why are we playing out from the back so slowly? Speed this up, it's too slow. But after being explained what Spurs are doing, I totally understand why the first 25 minutes against Arsenal we struggled. It wasn't because Arsenal were brilliant. Don't get me wrong, they were good at the press. It's because we're in the early phase of learning this system. So I want to explain playing out from the back, the new Spurs way, the Ange way, let's call it whatever, everyone feels comfortable with. Ange ball, right? Ange ball. And then I think it will help people understand now what we're trying to do every game and why some games we might struggle a little bit.
Okay, so let's take a look. So what are we looking at here?
Right. So this is a typical 4-3-3 versus a 4-3-3. Number one's Vicario, 4 and 5, Romero, Van de Ven, the 2 and the 3, Dogi and Porro. 6 Basuma, 7 Pape Sarr, 8 Maddison, the 10 11, let's call it Solomon and Kulu, number 9 Heung-min Son. So the players need to learn to do 2 things. One, to beat the press, but different types of press, which is what we're going to go through. And once you've beaten the press, how do you create an overload? And for people that don't understand, an overload is basically when you outnumber the opposition. Can we get 3 against 2? Can we get 4 against 3? Because it's great beating the press, but then what?
Got you.
So let's start off with a 2-man press. So our goalkeeper plays the ball to Mickey van der Ven, number 4. He's pressed by a red shirt. And Basuma, he's also pressed. Notice how, as soon as the ball goes to Mickey van der Ven, Basuma shifts across to the left where Mickey van der Ven is. Right. This is important in terms of the movement off the ball to allow the next passage of play to happen. This is deliberate. This is what they're coaching in Tottenham. When this happens, the pattern of play that then needs to happen is as follows. So if we go to the next slide. Van der Ven passes to the 5 Romero. Romero passes to the 3 Porro. So the way we beat the 2-man press is Basuma shifts out wide to bring the player with him to create a bit of space in the middle. And then it's a pass from Mickey van der Ven to Romero to Porro. And what this creates, if we go to the next slide, there's your overload, 3-on-2. So we're beating the 2-man press and we're creating the overload. So now we can attack down that flank, knowing that we've got the numbers to play them, to outplay the opposition. And then we take it into the final third. So that's the 2-man press, how we're trying to play to beat a 2-man press.
Okay, that's pretty impressive. Let's just hope that number 6 at the back doesn't also press as well. Then that all of a sudden creates more problems.
So right, that's a really good question. When creating these practices, let's call them practices, they're always open to an anomaly, to something that we weren't expecting. Football's dynamic. It's not static. It's not robotic. A, B, C, D. Well, what happens if there's something in between the A and the B, an 8.5 that we weren't expecting? This is where you need intelligent players with a creative mind to then make a decision in that moment. How do we get out of this? What we're doing here as coaches, or I say we, what Ange is doing, he's laying down the foundations upon which the team is built upon in terms of how they play, how they get out of situations, how they create the attacking options. But then you often hear Ange say, I don't get on the players. I want them to play. Don't worry if you make mistakes. He's encouraging that creativity to him. He's encouraging the brain.
Freedom of choice.
Absolutely. Because that's how you develop decision makers. That's how you develop a brain. If you tell someone, right, I want you to do da-da-da-da-da-da, that's great. But what if you've seen something that's better and you want to give it a go? If I hold you back, I'm stifling your creativity and your decision making. So I've got to give you that freedom.
That was the big problem with Conte, wasn't it? His philosophy, his strategy was so stringent, wasn't it? It was kind of, this pass has to go here every single time. This is how we play, and he didn't allow players to think for themselves, did he?
I wouldn't say it's a problem. I would say, did he have the players that are going to do what he says? Because his method has worked elsewhere. It was a problem for us. When you look at the players we had, perfect example, Basuma, as we've seen, is a complete different player under Ange.
Because he reacts a bit on instinct, doesn't he, Basuma? That's a lot of time. You see when he decides to beat a couple of players, that's not something that's always can be planned through the game. That's just about his individual quality. That's just about him deciding that. But then Conte, he doesn't like that. He doesn't like those variables. He wants every variable to be planned for, like, in his mind. And that's maybe a big, it's not like, I'm not saying it's worse, it's just the difference.
Yeah, it's a different philosophy of how you want the game played. But the important thing is, no matter what philosophy you play in, players need to be given some element of freedom. maybe that is a criticism of Conte then, because like I've said, there is no exact moment that is identical in football. So you've got to let a player decide what to do in those moments. And if a player continually makes decisions that delivers a positive outcome, that's what you want. It's when you've got players that struggle with it, and they always struggle with it, then probably you get to a point where you say, right, are you right for Tottenham for what we're doing? And sometimes you might have a good player that just doesn't fit your system, or they might just be a bad player. But essentially, look, that's how you beat the 2-man press. The next one is the 3-man press. So again, same starting position, 4-3-3, same players. Let's go to the next slide that shows the 3-man press. So the ball goes to Mickey van der Ven again. He's pressed. Basuma again shifts out to the left. He's pressed. But this time Romero's pressed as well. What do we do now? Well, it's a little bit more complicated, and it almost cost us a goal as well. So if we go to the next slide. Bear with me, okay?
All right. I see a lot of arrows.
A lot of arrows. The ball goes back to Vicario, whereas before the ball went to Romero and then to Porro.
Mm-hmm.
So letter A is the first pass. That's the arrow.
Mm-hmm.
Goes back to Vicario. The reason we do that is because the player that was marking Romero has now slightly shifted over. Naturally, you're going to just move over, anticipating a pass that you could intercept.
Mm-hmm.
Vicario then passes to Basuma. Now, we're comfortable with the ball going to Basuma because he can handle receiving the ball under pressure, which is a skill that very few can do. But
at that level as well, the elite level, yeah.
Barcelona, Xavi and Iniesta were prime players at doing that. That's why Barcelona were fantastic. But they were coached to do that. Barcelona never always just passed the ball into space. Pass it to someone who's marked, because it will teach them how to receive the ball under pressure. And the reason we go to Basuma, because it shifts players slightly across, and then Basuma shifts the ball right back to Vicario. Vicario sends it to Porro. So Romero shouldn't be touching the ball. So let's repeat that. 3-man press on the 4, the 6 and the 5, and the passage of play is Mickey van der Ven passes to Vicario, Vicario to Basuma, Basuma back to Vicario, Vicario out wide. Notice when the 3-man press happens, the number 11 for Spurs, Kulu, he's dropped back. So if we go to the next slide, the reason he does that is because now we create a 3-on-2 again, but higher up. Before, it was slightly deeper. So the 3-man press, it requires more passes. It requires more focus because it's a more complicated passage of play. But then we create a 3-man overload, again out wide, but higher up. And if anyone is familiar with Ange Postecoglou's Celtic team, I urge you to go and watch them, because this is exactly what happened at Celtic.
Yeah.
Exactly the same thing happened at Celtic.
And maybe that's why for a lot of this season we've been having not easily, but we've been having a lot of joy playing out the back and playing through teams' presses, especially against teams like Bournemouth who like to press, Arsenal like to press, United, although maybe against United in the first bit we had a bit of trouble, Matt, and also in the first bit against Arsenal. But what I like about what I've seen in those games, that even though we had a bit of trouble, we found solutions. The longer the game went on, it wasn't as like they didn't keep catching us. It got to a point where they all of a sudden couldn't handle how we were playing out from the back, and that's what I find really encouraging. That teams are struggling to kind of for 90 minutes handle how we're building up.
Yeah, one of the big reasons they struggle, and it's a reason why Pape Sarr plays for Spurs, by the way. Again, I'll give you some inside information that I picked up on Tuesday night. Why Pape Sarr starts for Spurs so often? I heard it from the horse's mouth. When you have possession of the ball and you continually move it across the back, trying to find which way out, the other team, you're wearing them down. We're letting the ball do the work. They're having to let their legs do the work. Physically, we're draining them, which is why you see towards many games we play, we seem to be a lot fitter towards the end of games. It's because of the way we play. But also, the players are fitter. They're being trained to be fitter. And the reason Pape Sarr is getting a lot of minutes this season, as well as being a good player, he has got a phenomenal engine, and this is what the club was saying to me. They said, because I asked about, look, what's going on with Oliver Skipp? Is Alfie Devine going to get a chance? They said, look, Pape Sarr, his fitness levels are brilliant. That's why he's starting every game sim, because you need legs for this.
Do you think
fitness levels?
Do you think
there's a lot of movement off the ball?
And there's an element of it as well. As you say, it's about players sometimes as well. Obviously, you have a plan, but you have to kind of, when things go unexpectedly or when something surprises you, you have to kind of figure out your own solution sometimes. Do you think maybe sometimes, like those first 20 minutes against Arsenal and the first half maybe against United, sometimes you have to have a bit of struggle to kind of figure out how they're pressing, and maybe that's why we spend the early games kind of figuring it out. Maybe we are having a bit of trouble. They're getting a bit of joy, but we're figuring out how they're pressing, what they're doing. Then all of a sudden, second half or even late in the first half, bam, we figured it out, and then we can play through them.
This is exactly why we struggled against Arsenal. And this is when it clicked in my head, because there's one more press we're going to show. We'll come into it in a minute. It's called the all-man press, when everyone presses us.
Man to man.
Man to man press, yeah. So we're 6 games, Premier League games, into our learning of how to play. We are 2 months into Ange Ball. We played a team that are 4 years into their coaching process, Arteta Ball, whatever you want to call it. And Arsenal are the second best team at pressing, in my opinion, in the league, if we're going to go by last year. Man City are the best, Arsenal the second best. We came up against one of the best. And we're saying to our group of players who have just started out playing Ange Ball, you're going to play the second best team in front of their fans at their ground, where they're super confident, who are all saying they're going to batter us. They're going to press you, where you're used to maybe 4 or 5 seconds, maybe, well, not 4 or 5 seconds, 3 or 4 seconds on the ball, looking at the opposition, reading what they're doing, what type of press. Is it 2-man? Is it 3-man? Is it, man to man? And then figuring out who moves where and what passage of play we've been trained to do. We came up against a team like Arsenal where we had 1 or 2 seconds. And this is why we were slow playing it out. It's because we had less time to read what was going on. And we've only had 6 games, 2 months of training, not of what to do, but reading it in different scenarios. This was the toughest scenario we've been in, where we had to read the situation and then play what's been coached. And this is why for 25, 30 minutes, it looked like we were being stifled. We weren't. It's because we're in the early phase of our development sim. And the fact we learnt that quick in the game and then dominate the second half, I don't care about Declan Rice not being in the pitch, on the pitch. Bentancur wasn't on the pitch. I don't care who didn't play. It doesn't matter.
Even by 10 minutes to go in the first half, we'd worked out.
Yeah, I mean, the last 10 minutes, it was all Tottenham. Injuries are no excuse for a team that's had 4 years of coaching. We've had 6 games. And that's why we looked a bit unbalanced, a bit slow in the first 25 minutes, because our players are having to read this press. They're all then supposed to read it at the same time and know where to move and then execute the passage of play. I mean, 6 games in.
It's never going to be that quick against the best pressing team in one of the best pressing teams in the country. There's always going to be a big ask. But the fact that they were able to yes, we struggled, but the fact that they came through that period and then were able to find the solutions even within that first half has got to be impressive. And Ange has got to be delighted with that.
The fact that Ange allowed them to get on with it, and the fact that he didn't do the biggest mistake he could have made, which he didn't make, which was to take off Udogie and Pape Sarr, who looked like they were struggling first half. Well, guess what? You learn by dealing with the situation. And he kept them on, because there's a couple of guys in the stands at the Emirates saying to me, mate, we've got to bring on Ben Davies. He's a sure pair of head. He's an assured head. He's got experience. I'm like, dude, what does that do to Udogie if you do that? And Ben Davies will get absolutely roasted by Saka for pace. Keep Udogie on. He's got to ride through it. Same with Pape Sarr.
And they did.
And that is a good quality of Ange.
All right, so now let's look at the next phase of pressing, a man-to-man press, because I'm sure this is probably the hardest kind of press to kind of deal with.
You'd think so, but actually it's quite a good one for us if it happens. So let's break it down. Again, this is coming straight out the club. This is, information they shared on Tuesday night. So again, 4-3-3, and then everyone presses us. So if we go to the next slide, we've had to drop deep as well. So you got a 6v6 press. The way we get out of this, and remember, when we get out of the press, we need to also create the overload. Number 9, Heung-min Son, will drop to the halfway line. The 10 and 11 will slightly push up. So we go to the next slide. It's a direct ball down the middle. Now, whether we can play it on the ground, which might be risky because it could be intercepted by the 2 Arsenal centre mids who are pressing us, or it's a ball not a long ball, not over the top, but it might just be a ball that needs to come off the ground. It's a medium range to long range pass. It's not a long ball. It's a medium to long range pass. Sonny picks up the ball, and then this triggers the 7 and the 8, Maddison and Bissouma to push, or maybe, Pape Sarr and Maddison to push. And then we go to the next slide. There's your overload, 5-on-4.
If we can get that ball through.
Yeah. So,
but what I see a lot of teams doing with their centre, especially good teams, is in that kind of situation they'll have, especially a strong centre back, follow that forward into a lot of into that position. But if they do that, it's going to leave a big hole behind them, wouldn't it? And that's maybe the risk that kind of strategy entails.
It's going to come down to the first touch of our striker. If the first touch is a good piece of control, check your shoulder, see where the centre back's coming from, then turn the other way, you've beaten him. Or as the ball's coming, check left, check right. Where's Bissouma? Where's Pape Sarr? First touch, lead them in, and then spin the centre back and go. So this is where that creative element comes in. That's where the technical ability comes in. But these are the scenarios that Spurs are being coached to beat. And we're not just playing out from the back because, it's possession football, just keep the ball. No, it's to create overloads. This is how you win games. It's by creating overloads. Obviously, that's not always the case, because if you look at the first goal that we scored against Arsenal, Son had 3 players around him. Where's the overload?
Yeah.
Right? That was just brilliant finishing and wonderful bit of creativity from Maddison. But this is more about building up the play from the back and then trying to outnumber the opposition. This is the foundations of the new Spurs way.
And that's so exciting. And look, and
the academy is doing this as well, Sim.
Yeah, and that's maybe why, as we said before, like we're seeing such an improvement in the academy. There's a lot of players that everyone is very excited about, but maybe they're just being given the platform to shine a lot more. Whereas maybe in previous years, like not to say they didn't have the platform, maybe it was a lot more difficult for them to maybe have that ability to show off what they've got in their locker. Whereas now, when we're as a youth team, when we're creating overloads, all of a sudden Donnelly's getting in a lot more goal scoring positions. Sunsop Bell is getting in a lot more goal scoring positions than maybe teams of the past. And then I'm seeing individual highlights of Dorrington playing out the back with his ball carrying ability and his passing range, and he's being able to show off those qualities because of the way we're playing. And that is super, super exciting. So when it comes, just on a final point, I guess, when it comes to the academy and that pathway to the first team, do you reckon maybe, because obviously that's been a big complaint, especially in the past 4 years, there's been no real pathway. Only really Ollie Skip has made that journey to the first team really in the past few years. The young players haven't been given a chance. But now if we're playing that kind of way in the first team, and the youth academies are playing in a similar way, will it be easier for them to step in and actually, when they actually get their chances, actually be part of the team and be more effective when they get those opportunities because of this kind of direction we're going in?
Okay. I'd say, to answer your question, there's 4 fundamental shifts that have happened inside the club regarding academy and first team. As long as they maintain these 4 shifts and keep pushing in that direction, then the answer is yes to your question. And those 4 shifts are, number 1, the alignment between academy and first team has to be maintained. Number 2, recruit players that suit the system, the things that we've just shown now. You just make sure the recruitment suits the system, not some egotistical trip that we go on. Number 3, only recruit managers for the first team that match the philosophy of the foundation that's now been put in place. And the last one is the mentality of winning that is now being said in the academy. And I think Ange is also doing that with the players. I know he doesn't mention about win often, but he's a winner. We've got to keep focusing on, this is great what we're doing, but we've also got to win at the end of it. So as long as the academy players are developing that winning mentality, not just, I'm going to be a pro footballer academy, then yes, is answer your question. So alignment of the academy, recruiting the right manager for the philosophy, the winning mentality, and I forgot the fourth.
I can't remember the other one as well. No, but I'm sure the viewers will. So in terms
rewind to watch what I said.
But in terms of the academy, from what I don't know if you've been watching maybe some of the highlights or maybe some of the games of the under-21s. From what you're seeing, do you reckon that, because there's a lot of people are talking about maybe a golden generation coming through at the moment in our academy, and a lot of the young players, is that a bit too much pressure maybe to put on them, or are you seeing like, wow, I think we've got some serious young players coming through at the moment?
I've always said, anytime I've spoken about youth football and adult football, the hardest bridge to cross is the one from youth to adult football. It's a different world. Once money comes into play, people's mentality changes. Having 100 mums and dads and coaches shouting on the touchline in a youth game compared to 62,000 people absolutely giving you hell in an away game, different kettle of fish. The pressure that comes with being a pro footballer, the cameras on you doing interviews, the media tearing you apart if you make a mistake and it costs you a goal. And actually playing men's football, that is the toughest bridge to cross, which is why you'll often see that Spurs, they tend to bring players into the first team between the ages of 20 and 21 because they think that's the right age. I don't necessarily agree with that, because players like Pape Sarr are proving that wrong. So you never know, Sim, until you give them a chance. But a chance isn't 15 minutes here, 10 minutes here. You've got to give them a proper run of games. And it's such a shame we're at the Carabao Cup, because that could have been an opportunity. But it's a tough bridge to cross. But look, if the players are good enough and the style is the same, it makes that bridge easier to cross, is what I would say.
All right, Stel, fascinating stuff. Really appreciate your
welcome.
insight, mate. If you want to go see more of Stel, go check out Tottenham Away as well on his YouTube channel. Link will be in the title and it'll be in the description as well, so go check out more of Stel. But thank you for joining us and thank you for watching. Like, subscribe and comment. And as always, come on you Spurs.